we live in a world that is not friendly to wise or godly choices. When was the last time you heard an advertisement said, oh, before you do this, go home and think about it? You know? Before you take out this great, massive loan you're going to be slaves to for the next 20 years, just take a breather, take a cup of tea, talk it over with your wisest friends, and that's not the world we live in. The world we live in says now. Right now is a good time. In fact, it's the best time, maybe the only time you'll get this deal. Please go ahead. Ring this number. We're looking at this beautiful new series called Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets. But I was impressed in the scriptures this last season as I prepared to look at a psalm. Psalm 36 tells us this. For the direction of music, a David psalm, a servant of the Lord, it says this, an oracle within my heart concerning the transgression of the wicked person. Dread of God has no effect on him. So I hear David saying, I've looked at this and trying to figure out what is it that gets into the heart of a person that turns them away from God. And first of all, it's the fact that they don't believe he's there. They don't fear him. For with his flattering opinion of himself, he does not discover and hate his iniquity. Now, we're talking about something we don't talk about very often. Sin is not a popular word. It's not a cultural word anymore. It's a word we want to sort of push aside as though it doesn't exist. But our iniquity is our own ownership of bad decisions, basically. Choices we've made by mistake or on purpose to step away from God. And he's saying, I noticed that. The words of his mouth are wicked and deceitful. He has ceased to be, here's our word, wise and well-doing. So he's moved aside from what might have been a different path in his life, and who hasn't been there? Who of us does not need this word for today to help us through? Well, there we go. Psalm 36, verses 1 to 4. Sometimes not making better decisions represents at least a missed opportunity. But at worst, it could be an open rebellion against the wise chooser for our life. Think about that as we go forward today. That's all I want to say as we set up our thoughts for this message. Here's the thing, not making a decision can be making a decision. Have you thought about that? How often have I made the choice by not making a choice? I could have chosen better, I could have chosen higher, but I didn't make a choice, so I ended up with what I got. And that's not always the best thing, is it? So let's move on from there today. And we're talking about something, I want to talk about curfews. Andy Stanley, in his book that we're basing our series on, tells a beautiful story of his own childhood when he got his first license to drive. And he used to be a responsible driver all week long until it came to the weekends. What was the difference? Curfew. You know that feeling like I've got to be home on time because mum and dad have said I've got this time. He said what used to happen to him was he'd become an aggressive, irresponsible driver on Fridays and Saturdays because of curfew. And here's how his mind would work. He would think, okay, I've got at least 5 minutes more before I have to leave. And then about 5 minutes later, he'd think, I could probably wait another 5 minutes before I leave. And then a bit later, he'd think, oh, I've got about 5 minutes, until finally he looked at it and said, I really don't have 5 minutes to get home. It's going to take longer than that, so I better floor it. I should put the foot down and keep going. This is curfew thinking. Now, he said what he decided to do when he had children was not make the curfew like that, but to say to them, here is the time that you have to leave. That's your curfew. That's the time, so that you won't make the choices I used to make when I was driving. And he calls it the 5-minute syndrome. And you know what? Whether we're talking about driving or the next zip of the credit card or the next bit of biscuit that we take out of the packet, or whether it's choosing to flirt with somebody you shouldn't, or whatever it is, that little 5-minute syndrome, I can get away with this, right? I feel like I'm okay if I just do this one little thing extra. But you know what? It's not going to work for us. Here's the mathematics. One more rarely adds anything. Think about that. One more rarely adds anything. You know what it's like. You get to that point where you've added one more thing, whatever it is, whether it be a relational or financial or work decision. You've added one more responsibility and you're not actually adding anything to your life. In fact, you're finding out that it's distracting, taking away, costing you what you didn't want to have to pay. And it's a choice we make, but it's a choice that may not be the best. One more usually results in less than what we value the most. One more drink, one more couple of biscuits, one more kilometre or 3 over the limit, one more swipe of the credit card will rarely get us what we really wanted. So we need to think about that. Whether it be driving or diet or spending, live as close to the line as possible is what we've been thinking. You know, how close can I get to the line? And let's delineate it this way to help us think about it. Our natural inclination is to live as close to the line as possible. What line? Well, it's the line between legal and illegal. It's the line between responsible and irresponsible. That line between moral and immoral. The line between ethical and unethical. That line between legal and illegal, you know what? I'm in control. We think I'm in control until we realize we're not in control anymore. You know what I'm talking about? It's that feeling like I should have known better than to do this, but it felt like I had some margin, but in the end, I had no margin left for error, no margin left for getting out of control and losing control. It's a human nature thing to snuggle up as close as possible to that line of responsibility, that line of morality, and that line of not getting into trouble. It's human nature to snuggle up there, and fueling this flirtation, you know, is with disaster is flawed assumptions that informs so many of our decisions. An assumption that impedes our ability to make good decisions. And let's illustrate this. I'm going to illustrate it with 4 contrasting ideas. If it's not wrong, then it's okay. That's a good assumption, isn't it? That will never get you into trouble. What about this one? If it's not illegal, then it must be permissible. All right? And what about this? If it's not immoral, then it's acceptable. Well, I mean, even find scriptures that say that. If it's not over the line, then it's fine. Okay, living close to that line, living close to that margin. How low can you go is really the question you're asking. You know what? You're saying, how far over the line can I go without getting caught or experiencing consequences close to addiction or close to becoming trapped by my decision? It happens by asking the wrong questions. Remember, we've said all through this series, good questions produce good decisions. So what if you ask the wrong question? Here's the wrong question. Is there anything wrong with this? Don't start with that question. All right? Is there anything wrong with this? Your conscience will always say, nah, it's right. You can get away with that. Nobody's going to notice. It's okay. And then we say, there's a better, more important question to ask, and this is it. It leads to better decisions. We've been saying all along, better decisions, fewer regrets. Wouldn't it be nice if I could always say to you, I've never made a bad decision? I'd like to tell you, I've never made a bad decision. I'd like to tell you that, but it wouldn't be true. The truth is, like you, I don't know you that well, but I know well enough that you've made choices that you regret. Things that you look back now and say, oh, what was I doing? And so the big idea of this series is an often overlooked thing that good questions make better decisions. Good questions set us up for good decisions. Our decisions are often no better, I'd like to say, no better than the questions we ask. Think of it that way. If I've asked the better question, I'll probably have a better decision. So, the problem is we don't even ask the question too often. We just go on. So here's the promise of this series that we've been talking about. If you ask wisely and honestly and answer that honestly, then you will act out of good faith and you will have an honest answer for an honest decision. You will make better decisions and have fewer regrets. Your life will be better. And the people who look up to you and depend on you will have a better result too. Oh, you mean I'm responsible for them too? Yes, some of us realize that late in life, that there's been people following you all along, and your decisions have set up for them bad choices, bad consequences. Now, I'm not meaning to be heavy, but it's really serious that we understand that as we go forward. We aren't the only people impacted by our regrets. Other people are affected. So, if you've been following along with us, we've been on several questions. This is the fourth of the 5 questions we'll ask in the series. The first one, Ruth brought us to understand the integrity question. Am I being honest with myself? And add the word really to that. Am I being honest with myself? Really? That's a good starting point to try and jettison bad decisions, cut them off. The second one, Pastor Simon, he tells a good story, doesn't he? Well, his was a conscience question. Is there tension that deserves attention? In the immortal words of Sister Mary Clarence of Sister Act 2, if you want to be somebody, if you want to go somewhere, gotta wake up and pay attention. There's a tension in our decisions. Sometimes it's like on paper it looks fine, but if we do it, we know there's something inside that's saying, I don't think that was a really good choice. Or if I thought about it a few more minutes, it wouldn't have happened. And that's the thing we're talking about there. And the third question Pastor Kev brought us was the legacy question. And this is a really important one. What story are you writing? You write the story of your life. I know God already knows the story of your life, but you write it. He allows you that free will to do it. And as you're writing it, what story and legacy are you leaving? Not only for your own name's sake, but for your offspring and your family. What is the story you're writing? A lot of good stuff. I think I can sit down now. That's enough. Whoa. I know. It's real church, so we're going to go on. So asking this question shows the next question is the maturity question. I laughed when they asked me to do this one. The maturity question. We'll get to what that question is in just a moment. In part 1, we suggested that you memorize this verse from Proverbs 27, verse 12. And it starts off with the words, the prudent see danger and they take refuge. But the simple keep on going and pay the penalty. Now, I was going to show you a picture. I'm not sure if it's there. Look at my new car. This is my latest car. Now, before you congratulate me, there's a story behind the Yaris, okay? Okay, and the story is a little bit embarrassing. We've got the first slide here. It says, if it's flooded. Now, help me out here. If it's flooded, forget it. Okay, my question is define flooded. All right? Conscience kicks in. Is it really flooded? Or is it just a little bit of water over the road? And so my story goes a little bit like this very briefly. I won't name the service that provides the vocal maps, but let's just say Miss G. Miss G was telling me on the map which way to go. I'd already looked at the map beforehand. I knew the best route to take, and I had it firmly in my mind before I started the journey. On the journey, the rain, we've had at least a month or so of rain here on the Gold Coast, and I can count on one hand the number of non-rainy days. So this particular Wednesday, 25th of February, I don't remember it, but it was teeming down. I set off to do a goodwill mission of delivering a meal to a needy family. And it was over there in that place, just a few kilometers away from here. And I was on my way, which I knew the way to go, except the last bit of it. So I turned on Miss G to give me a vocal reminder of where to go. So I'm going along, and suddenly the rain just started pouring so much that I couldn't even do the 80 kilometers on the freeway. I was down to about 35, just hoping that I'd hear Miss G say, "Exit here." So I did, when finally, wonderful words, a smooth, calming voice said, "Exit here." So I exited, up onto the bridge, turn right, across the freeway, get to the next set of lights, turn left, and I know there's where I'm going, just down there. And straight away, Miss G says, "Now turn right." Hang on, that's not the way I usually go, but Miss G, she knows everything. She can't be wrong. So I'm not going to blame Miss G, but hey, it was an influencing factor. So I turned right. I'm in the second lane turning right and get to the street where a famous Christian school is going uphill. Nobody knows which one I'm talking about. But right at the bottom of that hill, the waters had just now covered the whole road. Lane number 1 goes through. The people keep going. I'm thinking, I shouldn't. Nah, it's all right. They're getting through. So I gunned it. I got 3/4 of the way through. And then my lovely Ford Fiesta, God rest it, died. And then I panicked and thought, it's so close. I'm almost out of the water. I'll turn the ignition one more. By the way, don't do this. One more time. And of course, that sucked water into my engine and bang, it was done. It's all because of a stupid driver. Me. Now, in the scale of disasters, I know it's pretty minor, but that led to a whole new, leading to lots of events. A new Yaris, well, not really new, it's 2 years older than my Ford. Got about twice as many kilometers on it, but God blessed me and a few good decisions. Let me review them with you. The roadside assistance I'd paid for. They came out and tried to get me going and shook their heads and didn't say it out loud, but I could see what they were meaning. And then they called up a tow truck, and they took me on the towey to the nearest repair centre. And then the next day I was able to ring. The other thing I'd done well is actually insured the vehicle. And the insurer said, yes, I understand. It's no fault of yours. You still keep your lifetime rating, which really surprised me. But there you go. It couldn't have been a bad decision, but it was. And so then very quickly I got a 2 weeks rental out of that, which I didn't have to pay any more for. And so another car. It's a nice car, but not as good as what I had. The prudent see danger and take refuge. The simple, keep going, pay the penalty. Man, did that verse come to me then? Yeah, I hope you're getting serious. Okay. So the maturity question, I laugh. What is the wise thing for me to do? That's our question for today. Mature people understand and recognize the truth. They understand that a decision can be both not wrong and unwise at the same time. A decision can be not wrong but unwise at the same time. And that one got me into trouble. Isn't it true that your greatest regrets was preceded by a series of unwise decisions? That's where regrets come from. They weren't wrong, they weren't illegal, they may not have even been immoral, but they were unwise. And there we find ourselves in real life. Unwise decisions pave the way to moments and decisions that we will regret. Okay? But we've all been in it, so we're in it together. That's the good part. So what is the wise thing for me to do? Now, Paul thought about this, and he wrote a letter one time to a group of people who lived at Ephesus. We call it Ephesians. And in chapter 5 and verse 15 and 16, we read it this way. It says, "Be very careful then how you how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil." So there's our word, wise, unwise. Be careful. He realized that it was actually our responsibility to do that. You know, I love to talk about the fruit of the Spirit. One of the fruit is self-control. It's on me. I want God's help, but I need to have some self-control. And then he says, making the most of every opportunity. From that word in the Greek, we get the whole idea of, this is a time for redeeming. Imagine if you could go back of all the unwise choices you've made and could redeem those decisions and wipe them as though they never happened. Like even financially, imagine if you could undo some of the unwise choices you've made and where you would be now if you'd invested that time and money and effort into other wiser things. We can't just wave our hands and all the past is gone. But we can say from now on, I'm going to learn from my mistakes because it's so important that we do. And then he says, because the days are evil. That's an unusual statement to us these days. But to think about it, we live in a world that is not friendly to wise or godly choices. When was the last time you heard an advertisement said, before you do this, go home and think about it? Before you take out this great massive loan you're going to be slaves to for the next 20 years, just take a breather, take a cup of tea, talk it over with your wisest friends, and that's not the world we live in. The world we live in says now, right now is a good time. In fact, it's the best time, maybe the only time you'll get this deal. Please go ahead, ring this number, go online. It's so much quicker. We live in a generation that loves instant gratification, and we're guilty of it. So in this text, Paul is inviting us to invest our time wisely, to take that opportunity to undo some things or to prepare ourselves so we don't have to undo what it is. It goes counterculture. Like our church family values, there are times where we just have to say, I'm not going to go just the way of my friends. I'm going to choose a wiser choice. Whether it's in relationships or any part of our life, we have to be wise. We can be wise. It's not just somebody waving a stick saying, you gotta be wise. It's actually me saying, wow, I'm learning from my mistakes how much better it will be for me when I do the right thing and stop and think. So let's help here by unpacking this very quickly in the context of three more sort of thoughts or frameworks of thinking about it. We're going to do it this way. In the light of my past experience, my current circumstances, my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing for me to do? Let's think about this first one. In the light of my past experience, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. All right? Or put it another way, those who don't pay attention to what got them into trouble yesterday are going to be in trouble again tomorrow. It's not as pretty, but you get the meaning, right? Our personal past predisposes us to specific, tailor-made temptations, addictions, blind spots. You've seen it in other people, but the hardest person to detect it in is yourself. That's where a good family and friends can help you out. Andy Stanley tells the story of Steve in his book. And Steve, he says, is a young married guy. He's just getting married. He's just finishing the counseling sessions pre-marriage. And then the counsellor says, Steve, after you've finished your honeymoon in a couple of weeks' time, we want you to come back on your own for some future sessions, and I'll assign a specialist who knows about family connections to deal with you. And he thought, like most men would, hang on a minute, I did the right thing. I've just had the 4 weeks of counselling, which I paid for. You want me to come back? And he says right then and there, he got so mad, I pretty much confirmed my need for more counselling. So sure enough, he tells the story that Steve went away, had his honeymoon, came back, and there he was, submitting himself to further counselling. And he said, how long is this going to take? And they said, it might be months. He paid for that extra counselling, but Steve would tell you, that was the smartest and wisest choice I ever made, because otherwise it would have burned up the marriage and accused her, and it would all be on her, and I wouldn't be responsible, and we'd have nothing left. But now, years later, they're a firm, happy family, couple. So we can learn from Steve's experience. What about you? In the light of your past experience, what is the wise thing for you to do? Think about it. What have I learned from all these dead ends and wrong turns? What have I learned? Well, next thing, in light of my current, in light of my current circumstances, that's what I want to look at next. What you owe it to yourself and to those who depend upon you to look at your current circumstances. And what we're talking about here is, where are you set up to fail because of something in your past or something you had no control over? Our greatest regrets are usually preceded by unwise decisions, and so we need to think about our current circumstances. Life is seasonal, you know that. You go through patches of life where things are really changing for you. In light of your personal past experience, what is the wise thing? Not to get by things, but not whatever everybody else is doing things, but what is the wise thing for you to do? You know, most of my apologies come out of my not waiting to reply to something. Have you ever been in a situation where you got so angry at what was coming at you, you just wanted to reply and respond, sent that email which you wanted to delete later, and it said those words that you wish you could have wiped out because they weren't helpful? In light of your current circumstances, you might want to take a step back and not reply straight away. I had one this week where a client of mine was arguing with myself and my colleague and saying that we'd done the wrong thing for their tax situation, where I knew that we had not done that. And because they were impinging my integrity and my work, my goodness, I felt like just shooting back an email saying, how dare you say that? But I didn't. I waited, let them vent, let them get out of it, and then they started to talk sensibly with us. So there are times where our current circumstances mean it's time to wait. Our greatest regrets are usually preceded by unwise decisions. One of the questions I like to think about is, what breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? What breaks my heart is seeing people make decisions now with their kids or with their partners that, if they'd have taken another tack with that and thought about it, it would have been a greater and different outcome. If you're a child today and listening to this, don't just respond the way you feel as a frustrated teenager or young person. Listen to what mum and dad are saying, because actually they've made a few mistakes along the way. They actually have some wisdom for you. If you're the parent, don't just respond to that child as a nagging, horrible voice in your life and say, take a breath, I remember how I felt at their age, and then take some wisdom to reply accordingly. If we're not careful, we have the potential to contribute to the demise of what we hoped for. We say we're not hurting anybody and I can handle it. There's no law against it. God will forgive me. Our excuses are pervasive because they're mostly true, right? You aren't doing anything wrong. You're not hurting anyone. God will forgive you. It isn't illegal, but it's unwise. Unwise is the gateway to regrets. It paves the way to tipping point. The tipping point in your life where things could have gone a different way and they haven't. Would you be willing, let me ask you this, would you be willing to put aside your worn-out excuses? Would you be willing to say, you know what, I know if I ask the question seriously, am I being honest with myself, really? It's just an excuse I'm making. I can do better. I can do a wiser choice. Instead of excusing your way forward, dream and plan your way forward. He says, in light of my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing for me to do? Think about this. Everyone's going to be somewhere. You may not have even sat down and wrote it down, but you all have an idea of where you're going to be in 5, 10 years from now, what you expect out of your life. You know, what's going to happen to that future if I suddenly put aside all caution and don't make wise choices? Don't ask good questions about that future. What are you doing right now that has the potential to rob you of what you want in the future? Relationally, academically, financially, morally, even physically, what are you doing now that could rob your hopes and your dreams for the future? Because we need to know in ourselves what's honest. Let's get honest here. Putting a magnifying glass over those choices and keep making the right choices. Where necessary, we may have to apologize, repent, turn from them, stop doing things that we shouldn't do. But we know if we make the decision now to live on purpose what we want to be in the future, we have a chance, a good chance of going there. This also builds on that last legacy question. What story are you writing? Doesn't it? What's your future hopes and dreams? What is going to be the chapter, the next chapter of your life? No matter where you are in life, whether you're starting out of school or you're looking for retirement, it's all about what is the next best thing that I can be and do in my life. And there's a good and there's a bad, but that's not my cue. This is a saying that Andy Stanley invented. There's good and there's bad, that's not my cue, but rather what is the wise thing to do? This is a nice little phrase to even commit to memory. There's good, there's bad, but we're not going to measure everything between those two questions, but we're going to say, better question, what is the wise thing to do? You are a unique blend, you know, of your past experiences, your current circumstances, and your future hopes and dreams. Nobody else has that set that you have. And so you have a unique position and place to choose the next step. And so we're saying, in light of my hopes and future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing for me to do? So we'll sum it up one last time. You've been listening well, good on you. Here it is. In light of my past experience, my current circumstance, and my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing for me to do? If you put that one in your arsenal, in your toolkit, out of the 4 questions we've had so far, this is maybe one of the biggies, you know. This is one of the biggest. What is the wise thing to do? Please remember what the promise of the series is, that we wish for you this: if you will ask good questions and answer honestly and act on your honest answers from those questions, then you will make better decisions. You'll have fewer regrets. Yes, please. You will be better. Your life will be better, and those who depend upon you will have better outcomes as well, because we aren't the only people impacted by our decisions. I want to pray with you today. Can I do that? Are you ready? It's between you and God, actually, but I'll do some words. Perhaps today, while we're praying, you want to settle the high-order question, what's stopping you from surrendering to God today? Being wise is about surrender to the wisest one. Perhaps you've never come face to face with the choice to ask Jesus to forgive your worst choices and disappointments, let's call them sins, and give you a fresh start. And you can ask him right now. Now join me in these words, or use your own words. Lord Jesus, I have been so set on doing life my own way, but now I want to change. I need your forgiveness. Thank you, Lord, for coming into my life now to bring me to a pathway of wise thinking and better decisions. I surrender to you now. Take my life and turn it around for good. Amen.